Welcome into the Grace Point Daily Podcast. My name is Jeremiah Johnson. We exist to bring you daily encouragement for your daily walk with Christ. It is a verse-by-verse edition with none other than Dr. R.B. Maynard. How you doing, Dr. R.B. Maynard?
I'm just great. Couldn't be any better.
Hey, I really enjoy fall season. I like this time of year.
I do too. This is my favorite
cooler,
time.
The
sweatshirt
trees
weather
begin to change, and yeah, it's been awesome. I went to the workout this morning. 44 degrees.
Yeah,
even in Southwest Missouri here. Mm-hmm.
So I like sweatshirts because they're fat boy clothes.
All right.
Cover up more.
Yep. So anyway, on verse by verse, we get into the word. We go through it. We're in 1 Kings right now, but please like, share, subscribe, and listen to the verse by verse. Each and every week, we do it once a week, so thank you for that. You can also check us out on the good old Facebook Live, Grace Point Assembly of God. We appreciate that very much. So Dr. R.B. Maynard, let's get into the Word.
Here we go. 1 Kings 18:22, and it's like I tell my Sunday school class, every time we meet, we start in the middle of a story someplace. So this is still Elijah with the prophets of Baal. So in 22, it says, Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls, this is 22 through 24, get 2 bulls for us, let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. And so you have Elijah. We talked about it a little bit last week where he kind of stood alone, and now he makes the statement, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left. Now, I don't know how all that played out, why he was the only one, or maybe the only one that God was speaking through at that time. I mean, surely there was another prophet somewhere, but, he's kind of standing alone here. These words that I'm saying, I don't have a board meeting. I don't have 10 other prophets that I can call that will say, yeah, we agree with this prophecy from the Lord. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it takes, I don't know. I still think that God had to just have a conversation with some of these guys that they would know and be so bold as to how to handle these situations. One time in the New Testament, they were talking and it said, it seemed good to us, and it said it seemed good to us and the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
But it's still like, well, we don't know. Yeah. But it seems
we're leaving a little room for error, potential
right.
error. No.
So, the only prophet left, and there's 450 of them, and it makes the statement 450 false prophets. And again, it's in our time we have fake news. That's the big thing, the false prophets. I mean, we have these guys that are telling us things that aren't true and putting fear into people. We live in a world of a lot of fear right now. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is brainwashing and mind control. You talked about that last night. And it is a thing. Yeah. People say, oh, they can't control your mind. They can't make you think something, but there's a certain amount of that is true.
Yep, absolutely.
So anyway, they knew who God was, but he says, we'll see who the real God is. And these people had never seen Baal do a miracle, I don't think, because they're still coming. I mean, why would they show up? If they really believed that Baal was the God, why would all these people even show up to see this? They would say, oh, it's a circus. I'm not showing up for that. I already know that Baal is the true. But I think there's a bunch of people with a lot of doubt, and they want to show up to see if this is. And he says, the God who answers by fire, he is God. Mm-hmm. The capital letter G, he is God. And so, and it's going to be a tangible proof. It's going to be something they can see, not just something that that somebody tells them. And again, I wish we had more of that. We say it every week. I wish we had more of that where God showed himself. I used to pray at Willowcrest for some of those kids down there kids are just being kids. So, oh, there's no God. And, they haven't researched nothing. That's just their, and I would tell them, I say, I'm going to pray that you see something happen in your life that you'll be able to say, only God could have done that.
Yep.
There's no other way that could have worked out. And so the prophets of Baal really didn't have any choice. If they refused to do what Elijah was saying, then they were basically admitting defeat. And we mentioned this before, but they probably thought, well, God's not going to answer Elijah because he's not doing this like he's supposed to be doing it. He's not offering sacrifices in the temple like he's supposed to. And so he's bluffing. In other words, you could look at, well, okay, we'll go for this because surely he's not serious. Surely he doesn't really think that God's going to call fire from heaven. But this is not the first time, and Baal is god of the sun for them. So to call by fire would not be so outlandish for Elijah to say, you call on him and call fire from heaven, call on Baal, because if he's really a god, then he should be able to do that because he's the god of fire. But there was fire from heaven, and I would think they would get a little nervous if they knew the scriptures, because Cain and Abel, there was fire. Noah, there was fire from heaven. Abraham, there was fire from heaven. There was fire from heaven at the dedication of the temple. David saw fire from heaven. Solomon saw fire from heaven. Most of the time, that was because of divine approval, that God sent fire to burn up the sacrifices and those kind of things. And it was because of divine acceptance. And so this is, if they know those stories, and I'm sure they probably do, those people were probably pretty well versed in Old Testament events that had happened. And so they might be a little nervous. Hey, God has done fire from heaven before, the real God. But 18:25-26, Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. O Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. It's similar to a magician who says, pick a card, and you take the card, and then he'll say, do you want to keep that card or do you want to change it for? In other words, it's more of a proof if you give them the opportunity to change, because it's like, oh, well, I knew they were going to pick that card. Well, he gives them an opportunity to change the card if they want to. It's the same thing here. He's like, you pick the bull. You guys do your thing here, and I won't interfere. There's no trick to this that because I've done, maybe I filled that bull full of gasoline, so it's going to take a spark to, all kinds of tricks that could be. But, and the question is, did they really believe that Baal would answer? He's never done it before. Has he ever answered anything before? I don't know. Maybe there had been some what we would call magic tricks that had caused them to believe. Maybe they were true believers in Baal because they had seen something happen. And we've talked about this before. Satan has power. I mean, there are false gods. There are mediums. There are palm readers. Most of that is just somebody fooling people. I mean, it's just most of it's ridiculous. But, it's like the palm reader or the medium that will say, oh, I see somebody in heaven. Have you lost somebody recently? And they'll say, well, I lost my grandpa 5 years ago. That's who it is. And I'm seeing the letter R. Well, no, his name was John. J. I see a J. It's like, I mean, they know how to manipulate, how to direct people in a path. There's some of it that is complete trickery, but there's some of it that is satanic. Yeah. I mean, I think to a certain extent it's all satanic, but it's just trickery for some people. But I believe Satan can be involved. I think I think some of the magicians, some of the things they do, I'm like, I don't know that that's not, you know, that there's not little satanic things involved in that, because it's like,
we acknowledge there's a spiritual realm active and at work, and that it is available to tap into regardless of which team you're on. The Jesus team or the non-Jesus team. You know, my girls the other day were talking about one of their high school friends works at one of the older buildings in Carthage, Missouri, and talked about how, it's haunted, and you know, do you think that's real? I'm like, sure. And you are most liable to experience or to encounter what you expose yourself to. So if you want Jesus, you can expose yourself to him and the effects of what he can do or produce, vice versa. You know, if you want to open yourself up to demonic spiritual things, they're real, they're available, they can be tapped into, but those are not things that I engage in. So I don't have to worry about their effects because I'm not tapping into them.
I've heard that phrase many times, opening the door, you know, and it doesn't have to be wide open. You know, you just, little things creep in. And I think a lot of video games, I think there's a lot of satanic things involved in that. That
was really my goal last night, which I can tell people like they had to question it for a second. Speed of light versus speed of dark. Basically, I'm just trying to say, when you expose yourself to darkness, it can come in like a flood, really, really, really fast. So. Did you try that last night? Did you try your flickering your light on and off?
But I have to tell you, I'm gonna throw Kelly and Eddie Stevens under the bus. We were standing in the foyer last night, and everybody was gone, and we were standing out there, and it was Stella and I, and Belinda and Debbie, and they were like, "Where are our husbands?" And it's like, well, I don't know. And I walked back in the fellowship hall, and they weren't back there. And I was standing there. It's like, I hear voices, and I went into the bathroom, and Kelly and Eddie were standing in the bathroom talking, and I said, I bet you guys were in here flipping the lights off and on to try to see whether Pastor was telling the truth. If you don't get that, you'll have to watch last night's service to understand that. But
I
anyway.
seem to find multiple sources that affirm that, both scientific, YouTube videos, people that practice it. So basically, it was the speed of darkness is faster than the speed of light. That has nothing to do with God or his power. Like darkness is stronger.
I think when you turn a light bulb off, it instantly goes off. When you turn a light bulb on, it takes a split second for that to happen. I think so. I don't know what the in my when I used to be a scientist, that was what I learned. Before I became just a regular doctor. Anyway, but maybe they had seen him answer before because of satanic involvement and stuff, but he's the God of the sun. So Elijah uses the very thing against them that they believe in. You know, he could have said, I'm going to pray for water to come from heaven, or I'm going to pray for some other, but God knows how to speak to you where you are. He may not speak to me about playing satanic video games because I don't do that. He's not going to speak to me in that area of my life. But we know clear back with Moses, when they were trying to get the people out of Egypt, those plagues that came were all directly related to the gods that they worshiped. And a lot of people don't realize, they think they were just random. God just said, well, I'm going to send some flies, and I'm going to turn the river into blood. And, like he just thought of things that would make their life miserable. But each one of those things, they had a god of the water, and God struck the water. They had a god of the fly. They had a fly god, and God struck that. They had a fish god, and God struck the waters, and the fish died. He was directly, every curse that came against them was a curse that they believed in their God, and he was saying, I love God in that sense. I'm going to show you. I'm bigger than your god of fish, bigger than your god of flies, bigger than your god of water. all these things. So he chose, because it was Baal that was prevalent at the time, he chose that as the very thing to turn them. So, but their response, and I love this because I've never seen this before. I'm sure it happens in probably more in maybe Africa and the deep jungles and things where they're more cultish, if you would. But they were, it says they must have grown weary. They called on the God from morning till noon. So for hours, you have to admire, I guess, their dedication. Mm-hmm. They're calling on the wrong God. But, for us, if you said, okay, I want you all at the church at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to pray for such and so to happen. And an hour goes by and it doesn't happen, and people start going home. I mean, and I'm not saying I'm not being judgmental. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I might not. At some point you kind of start losing faith or whatever, and it's like, well, I need to go home. I need to do this. I need to do that. I mean, these are worshipers of the false god who are probably more willing to worship their God than we would be to the one true God. Mm-hmm. And I've said it about Jehovah's Witness, and I know we teach that they're a cult and those type things, but I'm not knocking on doors on Saturday morning to try to convert people to Christianity, to invite people to my church. And so even though it may be a wrong thing that some of these people are doing, you still have to admire their determination that they believe more in their God maybe than I do in my own God. Yeah, and that's hard to admit, but that kind of speaks for itself. But they must have been frustrated. They had to be disappointed in their God. They had to be embarrassed that they were doing all this and nothing was happening. And this, let me read. This is out of Revelation 13:13, and this is talking about the deception that people can be involved. It says, and he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. So even we're talking past way thousands of years ago that these things happened, but then in the future, the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is talking about he performed great miraculous signs, causing fire to come down from heaven and earth in full view of men. So, what would have stopped, other than God saying, we're not going to have this right now, but what would have stopped Baal from answering? I mean, it's talking about a false prophet, an antichrist that's going to be able to perform miracles, call down fire from heaven. So that's why there's so much confusion. It's like, again, if you go back to Moses, he threw his staff down and it turned into a snake. Well, what to say? The magicians that were there did the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, so sometimes it's not even enough to say, well, God, I saw God do this, and somebody else could say, well, I saw that happen without God. Mm-hmm. So it's not always a proof to people who don't want to believe. They can always write it off as something else. At noon, verse 27, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened. And you just have to, I love the story of Elijah. I mean, he's gutsy, he's sarcastic. I mean, I like sarcasm. And he has got to be the most sarcastic that there is to taunt people about the God that they're trying to worship, trying to call down fire. But I can't imagine sitting to the side and watching, and maybe he's seen this before. Maybe it's not a first-time event, but taunting and talking about the difference. Baal controls only the sun. He needs to listen to you. He doesn't know your thoughts. You need to yell at him. You need to repeat. He has needs. In other words, he's busy. He's traveling. He's tired and he needs to sleep. I mean, he's taunting them things about their God that his God is not those things. Mm-hmm. His God is not God over the sun. He's God over everything. He knows our thoughts. He can speak in a still small voice. You don't have to yell at him. I hear, and I know different styles of preachers. Man, Some of them just scream their whole sermon.
Right.
And I've said it before, but a lot of people, I read one time, said, what's the difference in a preacher and a teacher? And it says the preacher yells it and the teacher tells it. Same sermon, just different, So I don't know. But anyway.
Teachers are just kind of more nerdy to me, I think, overall.
Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right. I'm leaving now. I'm offended. But he can speak in still small voice. Vain repetitions, it's not going to matter. And I do understand that we continue to pray for the same things. I mean, I pray every week for my kids. I pray, we come to church and we pray for souls to be saved. And, we continue to do that. But I don't spend all day, get up in the morning. I'm praying for my two sons today. Lord, help them today. Lord, help them. Lord, help them. Lord, please help them. Lord, help, all day long. There's a point where it becomes vain repetition. I mean, he got onto the Pharisees for that.
Yes.
So that very thing of just, you wear your tassels long and you wear your phylacteries wide and all those, thinking that God is going to pay more attention, or thinking that God or that people are going to think you're more spiritual because they hear you saying these prayers and, all of those things. But vain repetition, it's vain when you just begin to, I think sometimes, I don't know how God is, but I have to think sometimes He's like, I heard you the first time, or He maybe is saying, I already said no with that. I have to wonder, and this would get off into a whole different thing, but I have to wonder with like someone who's paralyzed. What was the lady that was in the ski accident and was paralyzed? And she's Johnny Erickson Tada.
Okay.
She was paralyzed as a young woman, and she's done great things with ministry. Has written books. She's painted. She's really done something. Been a testimony with that life. I don't know if at some point you would stop and say, this is my lot, and this is my ministry. This is my lot in life. I've done far more through my disability than I ever could have done or would have done without this disability. I mean, at some point, do you stop and say, this is what God wants. I'm not asking Him to heal me anymore. I asked Him for 20 years, and He said no. And, I don't know. I don't know what God's thoughts are. I don't know what it would be like if I was in that situation. Would I at some point say, I've asked all I'm going to ask, and God apparently has said no, so I'm done. Yep. I'm not going to have those, quote, vain repetitions anymore. So I don't know. That I'm not deep enough into theology to figure that one out. But 1828, it says, so they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until the blood flowed. And this is almost like we will force God to listen to us. We've yelled, we've screamed, we've danced, we've done all these things. Now we're going to offer our own blood as a sacrifice to our God. And they begin to slash themselves with swords. I mean, I can't imagine the dedication, or are they possessed in a sense? These false prophets, are they possessed in some sense that allows them to go on and even to cut themselves? And maybe Baal will feel sorry for us that we're cutting ourselves and have to answer. It would be, the only thing I could relate to it is fasting, because sometimes we feel like fasting is twisting God's arm to do something. That, well, if I fast for this, then God has to do it because I sacrificed for this. Or if I give money, God has to bless me because that's what He said, so He has to do this. And that's not always the case, because God it's going to do what God wants to do and feels is necessary. But I went to this, and we just talked about Willowcrest, but this idea of self-harming, I'm not going to say it's all satanic, because it's a psychological problem. There's lots of reasons for it, but there's cutting, scratching, burning, carving, hitting yourself, piercing, pulling out hair, picking at wounds. There's all kinds of things, and the best, in a nutshell, description of that was that it was a substitute for the pain that they feel inside, that if you cut yourself, your mind goes to the pain of that cut and takes it away from the pain that's going on. I can't imagine, I mean, we've all been through those times of grief, struggle, depression, anxiety, anger, all the things, all the emotions. I have never been to a point where I thought about hurting myself so I'm not going to I can't put that into a category. That's just crazy. Those people are just crazy. I mean, it is a mental disorder. And when we went to Willowcrest, I mean, you're talking young kids.
Yes.
That, I mean, they would come in. Now, some of them, honestly, there's just like anything, there's going to be some of them they think it's cool. They showed me their cut or their scar. Well, I'm going to make one too, so I can show them I'm tough, like it's a tough thing. So there's always going to be people that just do it for whatever. But when we went to Willowcrest, if we took a magazine down there, we had to take the staples out of it, because they would take the staples and use them to cut themselves.
Yeah, wow.
When we, right at the first, we learned our lesson later, but we bought sweatshirts, hoodies. We had to take the strings out of them because they could choke themselves. It's amazing how resourceful, if you really want to do that, you got fingernails. If you want to scratch yourself, cut yourself with your nail, I mean, they would find ways. And some of those kids, like I say, some of them might have a little scratch on them, like they were really, but there were kids who came in there that had scars up and down their arms. They were scars.
Yeah.
I mean, they had been cut. And it's not an idea of suicide. So it's not like cutting deep enough to try to cut vessels and kill yourself. It's just a anguish, that's so severe that's, and it says, I looked up some numbers, but 17% of people will self-harm. I mean, that's pretty,
wow.
If we have 100 people in church, 17 people are considered, and I'm not saying that in every case, but the average age is 15 years old. 45% of those 15-year-olds will cut themselves. It's not about pulling hair and doing all that. Most of them are cutting themselves.
Big thing.
But and it says there's a 50% increase since 2009. So in the last 11 years, there's been a 50% increase, and that has to go to just more depression, anxiety, trouble, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be. I don't know all of the causes behind that, but something's happened in the last 10 or 11 years to cause that increase in something like that. So we'll move on from there. But 1829, midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice, but there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. And, Elijah wasn't worried about having to wait, that, well, if I have to wait very long, what if God doesn't answer now? I thought God was going to answer this morning, and now here it is nighttime. But Elijah's God is not going to take so long. He knows that, he's not going to have to dance around. He's not going to have to cut himself. He's not going to have to yell and scream or anything else. It's going to be just a simple prayer that sees that happen. And I've said it before with prayer. My mother, I can remember one time we were driving back from California, and we were in a really big rainstorm. And this was before interstate. That's when everything was two-lane, Highway 66 all the way to California, two-lane highways through every town. And but my dad pulled out to pass somebody and hydroplaned. And I can remember the car just like spinning and went off in the ditch. And I mean, we never overturned, never hit anything. I mean, it was just like slid right up to a pole and stopped, But, my mom didn't say, "Oh God, creator of the universe, you see our troubles, please, cause this car." I mean, there was none of that. She was saying, "Oh, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus."
Mm-hmm.
And so, by thinking that somehow we have to say some big, long, eloquent prayer to get an answer is just simply not the truth. There's many times that my prayer is, "Lord, help me." Whatever the case may be. If I'm being too critical, "Lord, help me." Mm-hmm. If I'm sick, "Lord, help me." I mean, sometimes that's all, do we really believe that we serve a God who says, "Well, I heard you say, 'Lord, help me,' but you're going to have to do better than that. You're going to have to be a little more eloquent, or I'm not going to be able to help you out here." And I have a old friend who became a Catholic priest, and I see him on Facebook, and I'm not making fun of him. I don't think he's listening, but I'm not making fun of him. Mm-hmm. But he will post a prayer, and he's posted prayers for me. If I said something about, be praying for whatever situation it was, he would post a prayer on Facebook, but it was, "Oh Lord, we pray thee, come to thy humble servant." It was very eloquent, probably written out, but God is not any more likely to answer our King James prayer than he is our Passion prayer.
I wonder if he knows you're a doctor now.
I don't know if he's heard that or not, but
I had, which is a funny story. So anyway, I don't think this person, but anyway, my cousin came to visit last night. But anyway, first person who came up to us, Kelly, our secretary, my secretary, and said, "Is Reverend Johnson here?" Oh. And she said, "Who?" Hey, come on.
Yeah, that just doesn't. Reverend Johnson doesn't have a good ring to it. Now, Reverend Rick, that's got a good ring to it.
So maybe this Sunday I'll get up on that old pulpit and say, "Hey, you know what my name is, right? It's Reverend Johnson."
Reverend.
So you've been talking to me very disrespectfully these last 2 years.
I expect a little more. Yeah, there you go. But his God's not going to take too long. But I love it that they're praying to their God. There's no response, no answer. No one paid attention. So their false God wasn't even, they were just shouting to the air. There was nothing out there. And the conclusion was, if no one answers, no one's listening, Baal's not just hiding behind a door. I thought maybe, I better not say it. Some of them were just Jehovah's Witness, but we better wrap it up. I'll tell my favorite Jehovah's Witness joke, and I don't think I'll offend anybody here, but do you know the difference or what you get if you cross an atheist and a Jehovah's Witness?
I do not.
Someone who knocks on your door for no apparent reason. We'll finish with that today.
All righty. Hey, thank you guys for listening to the Verse by Verse Grace One Daily podcast. I want to encourage you guys, if you're looking at the screen right now, watching us live, I don't always do this, but this is our homepage here. You can listen to us on everywhere, wherever you find podcasts. You can also support. If you can hit that support button, you can support the Grace One Daily podcast. You can also send us a message, interact with us. We would appreciate all of that stuff. So praise God. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Grace One Daily podcast. We'll talk to you guys next time.